the way it currently stands, forced labor, slavery takes precedence over rehabilitation and public safety.
Oh, by the way, while the Biden administration gives reparations to everyone but free people, look at the billions he has run over to Ukraine.
We don't have black grocery stores because if you think about it now, just to get in that supply chain, it's almost unheard of.
They don't want the truth to get out. Okay? I don't want to know what my family did or what all these people did and all this stuff like that. Okay?
Come on.
You read that 500-page report.
There's this thing called white superiority and black inferiority. That mindset allows all of the behaviors that we've seen across generations, allows for the construction of these policies and practices and systems and structures that continue to oppress us. This is not a handout. This is a debt that is owed.
You know, Allensworth was like the internet of his time in 1904, 1905.
The total black population in California is about 2.6 million, and then of that, the descendants compose about 2.2 million of that. So California, with a multi-billion-dollar surplus, can absolutely afford to satisfy the international terms for reparations, beginning with compensation.
Any financial obstacle that exists that impedes the success of increasing financial prosperity needs to be dealt with and eliminated.
No matter where we've been, no matter what part of this fight we've been in, we've been harmed, and we've had harm done to us specifically.
When I got to Los Angeles, this was some of the worst segregation I'd ever seen. And remember, I'm telling you, I'm from Mississippi.
Because as you can see, I'm giving you broken history right now, you know? But I had to give it to you guys today. I said, no, I got to show them this because it's so precious and nobody really knows about it.
Black people don't have that kind of luxury. Our historically black communities have been redistricted multiple times.
Now listen, if you can't handle the TR roof, don't tune in.
Hey fam, what's going on? What's going on? Thanks everyone for joining. And we're actually going to be talking about the Obamas, see what's going on with that. We were supposed to have Angela Nirvana in today, but she is actually getting ready for her show. So go check out Angela. I believe if you want to check her out, maybe this afternoon sometime, like
yeah,
noon
I think
or 12:30.
it goes live at noon. So check for that. The Reparist Perspective at noon.
Definitely. All right. So looks like NAASD, the National Reparations Advocacy Organization, had their summit in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah, hopefully that's an inaugural summit and they'll be having more in the future. It looked like it was a really informative session from what we see them sharing online. So definitely check out NAASD on Twitter, and CJEC Official was also posting a lot of information about it. As we can see the fam in this picture here, we got Chris L. From the Cali team, and Marcus. I see Chad. I even see Marcel back there. So shout out for everybody who turned out to the NAASD Summit in Atlanta.
Shout out. I think we have a clip, don't we?
Yeah, let's take a quick look at a quick clip that was circulating online.
I am a part of Be the Power and the United Sons and Daughters. In the building. First, I want to thank NAASD, CJEC, and the media, and everybody in what I call the Cali fam for the work that y'all are doing and inspiring us. You know, me and y'all sitting back there like, yo, bro, we got to step out. We trail. We We got to get this thing going. So one of the things that I'm going to touch on today is this American freedman thing, right? And correct me on the pronunciation, Tateishi. He spoke to eligibility, right? And us having a difficult battle when it comes to who would be eligible and how would we find those whom are eligible for reparation. My team and I have we knocked that ball out of the park. This is from the congressional record that's in the Senate. And so I want to get a little bit into the race-based versus lineage-based conversation, and then we'll get into that portion of it. And then I'm going to define what an American freedman is. So I want to just read the underline. It says, the opponents of the Freedmen's Bureau Acts attacked the Bureau on the ground that it would apply to members of only one race. It says the response was that discrimination was justified in the interest of equality. And that's basically what reparations is, right? Any group that has received reparations, there is justifiable discrimination to some degree. Quote, we need a Freedmen's Bureau, said one supporter, not because these people are Negroes, but because they are men who have been for generations despoiled their rights. And this is something that we bring up often.
Yeah, so salute to everybody who had a hand in reviving our American freedman status.
Absolutely. Shout out to Naeem and the brothers over at Be the Power and everybody else who's fighting for American freedmen. Shout out. So let's keep it going, shall we? So looks like out here in California, Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed AB 2296, which would extend the task force and at the same time have the power of some legislators to basically remove and replace some task force members from the task force. So that bill has been vetoed by Governor Newsom. So if I understand correctly, AB 3121, the original bill that Governor Gavin Newsom signed, is still active.
Yep, still active and still intact.
Woo.
So, no extension that nobody on the task force asked for, and no ability to remove members. They do have a lifetime tenure on the task force. So that's absolutely good news.
Facts. All right. So let's go to, if anybody hasn't seen the task force meetings, go ahead, check us out on Amen the Mass Media Group on the 23rd and 24th. That was held down in Los Angeles. We're actually posting some behind the scenes as well, if you guys haven't checked that out. Yeah, we're just, trying to capture as much as we possibly can with this reparations movement. But yeah, definitely check that out on the 23rd and 24th.
All right, you can tune into ETM Media for both days. If you were able to make it out there, there was some powerful testimony. And also, I'm going to go off cam for just 1 second to show you.
Oh, okay. You're on camera? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm on camera. Just showing this hard copy of the task force report that they handed out both days at the 2-day meeting in Los Angeles. So very excited to get my hands on one of these, as well as other attendees that showed up. So that was really a highlight, one of the highlights of the 2-day meeting in Los Angeles.
All right. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Yes, it was really cool, that they did provide that report. It was thick too. Thick book. Yeah, definitely something I think would be probably even more impactful than the Monahan report that came out. What was that, in the 60s, 70s, I think?
Yeah, the Kern report that they keep
Yeah,
talking about. I
the
haven't
Kern report.
read
Yeah,
that one. They said that the Kern report was approximately 40 pages, and yeah, it came out in the 60s or 70s during that unrest, civil unrest. But then nothing ever came out of it. So, we're going to ensure that something comes out of this 500-page report that I just showed you.
facts. All right, so next we actually are going to be reading, or I will, unless anybody else would like to volunteer. We'd really appreciate that. But for now, I will be reading the California Reparations Task Force report. Hopefully, starting this Monday through Friday, right here on Even the Mass Media Group YouTube page, starting at 8:30 p.m. Going through it chapter by chapter. It's a good report, great report. I personally haven't read through the whole thing yet. I've read bits and pieces here, so we'll be just doing this live. I even said to myself, if I don't do this right now at this particular point in time, then I probably won't actually be getting it done to read. So yeah, so family, if you can, check us out here. If you haven't read it, if you have read it, come support and do what we do. Listen, really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
definitely important to have this information archived somewhere. Chris L. is also reading the report chapter by chapter on Twitter if you catch any of those spaces. But yeah, reading through the report, that's a good way to hold yourself accountable for getting this reading done, Yamoya. Thanks so much.
Hey, you know what we do. If somebody don't do it, then it won't get done. All right. Let's bring up some updates here. Out here in California, in Weed, which actually has a Black community, which people probably don't know. We actually talk about Weed in our Reparations Now documentary, just to kind of give the family an update.
Yeah, it's a dwindling Black community, and unfortunately, due to this recent fire, might even be dwindling even further. But
yeah, facts. All right, so a quick update. All evacuated orders and warnings within the mill fire perimeter have been lifted. The fire sparked on September 9th and spread rapidly, devastating the communities of Weed and Lake Shastania in Siskiyou County, California. 2 people were killed by the mill fire and it destroyed 92 buildings. The fire is now under control and it's burned a total of 3,935 acres. Containment now stands at 95%, and fire officials expect to have full containment by Wednesday, the 14th. This was actually written on September 12th, so I think by now they have full containment. Let's see, there was no fire growth overnight. Fire personnel will continue to be engaged in mop up and tactical patrol until the fires reach full containment. Yeah, so I think it's pretty much contained right now. I do know some people that I think they might still have relatives in Weed. I'm pretty sure that they do, but I know some people that actually came from Weed and lived in Weed, and so I'm gonna see if I can follow up with them to see if they can give the family an update just to make sure everything's okay. The last time I did speak with them, they said that pretty much that Black community known as
Lincoln Heights, yeah. So I'm
yeah.
hoping that Lincoln Heights, hopefully, there's some insurance in place where they'll be able to rebuild that community. It really does have a lot of, American freedmen history.
Yeah, facts. I think it was called the Quarters. I think before then, the Quarters before then. Yeah. So
yeah.
So keep them in our prayers, family.
Yeah.
All right. So I know last time we talked about Jackson. Let me see. I'm gonna put this in the chat if anybody wants to read this article, it's a good one. It gives it a good perspective on, I think Mayor Lumumba is the brother's name, and his father and his family, basically, and their activism, and kind of gives everybody an update in what's going on with Jackson, Mississippi.
I think we have a quick video update to play also. You want me to roll that?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay.
Mississippi is facing growing pressure to do something about its water crisis, which is rooted in racial inequity. The city, which is 83% black, was recently without clean drinking water for weeks. And the water system has had problems for decades. So now the Justice Department is threatening legal action unless things change. And the NAACP has filed a federal discrimination complaint accusing Mississippi of diverting federal money meant to address the water crisis to white communities with significantly less need. Joining me now is NAACP President and CEO Derek Johnson and Springboard to Opportunity CEO Aisha Nyandoro. Very happy to have you both with me here this morning. I want to start with you, Aisha, and just to hear, first and foremost, what is the current status of the drinking water in Jackson and how are residents there faring?
No, thank you so much, Tiffany, and thank you for having me. You know, the current status is there are sprinklings of the city that are still under a board of water notice, but how residents are feeling are frustrated, tired, and scared. There has been mixed messaging as it relates to the safety of the water. And so residents, quite frankly and fairly enough, are still not drinking that water, are still boiling the water, and are still dependent upon bottled water for many of the basic necessities for drinking, brushing teeth, cooking food, or even bathing their children in some instances. So it's a very precarious situation that we're still up against. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation today because individuals are trying to declare victory because the water is back on in some instances, but we haven't won anything.
Well, speaking of the residents of Jackson who haven't won anything, while they are still under a boil water advisory, and while you see what's happening on your screen there, I just want to play a soundbite from the governor, Tate Reeves, who expressed how much he cares about Jackson. Take a listen.
I've got to tell you, it is a great day to be in Hattiesburg. It's also, as always, a great day to not be in Jackson. I feel like I should take off my emergency management director hat and leave it in the car, and take off my public works director hat and leave it in the car.
Derek, I find that disgusting. Can you talk to us about the federal complaint that the NAACP is leading? And I just do want our viewers to know that Derek is a longtime resident of Jackson, so you are very familiar with what's happening on the ground there.
Absolutely, and thank you for having us. So on Tuesday, NAACP, we filed a Title VI administrative complaint with EPA because of the pattern and practice of discrimination the state of Mississippi has had against the residents in the city of Jackson for the last 3 decades. We almost had the same system failure in 2010. The mayors from 1997 up to current has consistently requested more resources from the state. And what's ironic about it is not even the state's money. It is federal clean water money that goes to the state, and then the state allocate. They have intentionally not provided the city of Jackson with the resources to address it. And just recently, with the intended uses plan the state submitted for over $450 million that will come from EPA, the state is only allocating $500,000 for the city of Jackson. So we are also asking the citizens of the city to file an objection and ask EPA not to approve the state intended use plans because this is obvious discrimination. It is decades long and is intended to starve the city of resources to maintain quality clean water.
Wow, that wasn't even funny at all. Not whatsoever.
So they're still struggling. Oh, yeah, I see you put the comment up from Shanna saying that the Kern report was released in 1968. So thanks for that, Shanna. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, but this Mississippi situation, it's not funny. And it sounds like they're still going through, struggles. I mean, getting this fixed. I mean, they gave Brett Favre all the money that needs to be going towards getting the water fixed.
Yeah, and then even in this article called "The Water Crisis Test Mississippi," they even explain how basically it was white flight, from Jackson, and basically where the majority of white people are more influenced or affluent areas, their water is cool. They doing all right outside of Mississippi, but and even within Jackson, but there's just certain parts within Jackson that are predominantly black that are going through this crisis. So,
Right. So when the white people fled, the money left with them, it sounds like, and they're not equitably splitting up the resources. I mean, these neighborhood people are taxed at the same rate. So why aren't resources split equitably at the same rate?
yeah. So yeah, prayers out to Jackson, Mississippi, and reparations now for the Mississippi family, because they got to get them reparations.
Yeah, I mean, this could be fixed very. I mean, the last number I heard was like $1 billion, and they've sent billions to the Ukraine, so they need to just get this fixed. Next update, hopefully, will be that the water situation has been fixed in Jackson, Mississippi.
Facts. All right, so let's get busy. Let's get into it. So we're going to be talking about Obama, but before we do that, do we have the video for the historic portrait that was made available?
Let's roll it.
All right, cool.
Children and my children, you embody dignity beyond measure, Michelle. And together you and Barack made history. You both generated hope for millions of people who were left behind for so long. And it matters. You both did it with such grace and such class. You dreamed big and secured lasting wins for the American people, helping lift their burden with the blessing of hope. It was so underestimated, the notion of just having hope. A reminder of all here and now for those to come to power that hope and change matters. Barack and Michelle, it's my honor to invite you both to the stage for the unveiling of your official portraits. Come on up.
Yes? Okay. There we go.
There you go. Did you notice how many times Joe Biden said hope?
Yes, I did.
It was like a recurring word, a recurring statement. Just hope. Just keep hope alive. Hope, 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 hope. Yeah, well, you need to hopefully sign us over them reparations. That's what you need to do.
Right. That's what I'm hoping for, too.
So anyway, let's get into it, family. Please like, share, and subscribe. Share it out, hit that like button, and I believe
so the pictures are officially. You're just gonna gloss past them. I mean, what are your thoughts on these official portraits?
A portrait. Oh well, before I say that, and if y'all want to, I think there's a super chat button somewhere around there, maybe. So go ahead and donate. But if not, it's all good. We're gonna still keep
super chat.
Smash the super chat, but we're gonna keep it pushing. What is my 2 cents on the portrait?
Yeah.
They're nice.
Okay.
What'd you think?
Well, I noticed that I don't know, maybe, I don't know. It just seems to me, I know that there was a lot of talk about her manly shoulders during when they were in office. So, I mean, that's one thing that stuck out to me is that they definitely highlighted her shoulders in that portrait picture. But other than that, I mean, I guess they're nice. The first Kenyan president memorialized at the White House now. So I mean, I guess it's good. It kind of went down without a lot of fanfare, though. I will say, the moment kind of came and went. I'll say.
Yeah, I mean, I briefly remember watching the unveiling of the portraits, and I was like, all right, that's cool. But I just noticed that, Joe Biden just kept saying hope, 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 hope.
Hope, hope,
And
hope. So I
that's
guess
what
those
stood
are
out.
the official portraits. And I was kind of like, it felt like a deja vu moment. I'm like, haven't we gone through this before? But I guess, and I did a quick search. And
Mhm.
do you remember these portraits? But I guess they were not the official portraits.
Yeah, I don't remember those, but thanks for that.
Well, apparently they're making their tour, so maybe they'll come to a city near you.
All right.
All right, so let's get back to it.
All right. So Obama answers critics who say he didn't do enough for African Americans. And it looks like this is an interview on the Breakfast Club. All right, let's get into it. One of the strangest talking points of President Barack Obama's presidency is that he did nothing for African Americans. This is despite slashing the black unemployment rate in half, which Trump often took credit for, appointing a historic amount of black judges to the federal bench, a My Brother's Keeper initiative that focused on black men, and much more. While promoting his memoir, A Promised Land, Obama addressed these critics in an interview with the Breakfast Club, saying, I understand it because when I got elected, there was so much excitement and hope. And I also think we generally viewed the presidency as almost like a monarchy, in the sense of once the president is there, he can just do whatever he needs to get done. And if he's not doing it, then it must be because he didn't want to do it. Nonetheless, Obama stated he has the data and receipts to back up his record. As he explained, 3 million African Americans received health care who didn't have it before. Black poverty dropped to its lowest level since 1968. The incarceration rate declined, and he instituted massive criminal justice reforms like the 2010 Fair Sentencing Act. After giving specifics, Charlemagne asked, I think people will want to know, what did you do specifically for Black people? The systemic things that we've done to Black people to put us in these positions, we need specific systemic things to get us out. Obama repeated himself. But what I'm saying, Charlemagne, is Black poverty dropped faster than everybody else. Black incomes went up more than a lot of other folks. So the issue is sometimes we just didn't go around advertising that because, once again, the goal here is to build coalitions where everybody is getting something so that they all feel like they've got a stake in it. He also added, the truth of the matter is, at the end of the day, there is no way in 8 years to make up for 200 years. So there you go. And it is what it is, family. I don't know what y'all have to think about that, but that's according to Obama. What he
Yeah,
said
his
he
own
what he
words.
did.
It was all lives matter. I mean, and I don't know. I can't really verify. I haven't seen the documentation or videos or anything like that. But word on the street is, that there was some backroom deal where reparations were not supposed to be mentioned during the Obama administration because he just didn't want to have to, deal with it. Didn't want to talk about it until he was out of office. But I did see an interview. I'm not sure who it was with Obama, where he was asked about reparations, and he basically said what we just heard here is that all lives matter, and we need to uplift everybody, and Black people will get caught in that rising tide of uplift if we do something for everyone. So basically, he did nothing specific for Black people. Is correct.
Kind of sounds like I was gonna
Yeah,
call
it sounds like
Obama.
Obama. Yeah.
Obama and what's the Vice President Kamala Harris
Wow.
as well.
I don't even think she's uplifting anybody. Yeah, maybe the immigrants that she's letting into the country.
There you go. All right, so there was an article let's see. Was there anything we need to talk about before we jump into this? No, I think we're good to go. All right. So, Dr. Sandy Darity wrote a great article that we're going to read. I believe he, or actually not he, but the article in the Atlantic looks like it was distributed and made public on December 22nd, 2016. I'm going to go ahead and put this in the chat. So if anybody wants to reference it, you can go ahead and do that while we're reading through it. You guys can check that out for sure. So anyway, let's see what Dr. William A. Darity Jr. had to say about Barack Obama, shall we? Let's do it. All right. So how Barack Obama failed Black Americans. Born in 1953, I am a child of the waning years of legal segregation in the United States. My parents, on the other hand, spent about 40 years of their lives under Jim Crow, and all of my grandparents lived most of their lives under official American apartheid. At the time of Barack Obama's election to the presidency in 2008, my mother and all four of my grandparents were deceased. But my father was alive and well, and absolutely thrilled to have lived to see the election of a Black man as president of the United States. Usually deeply cynical about American politics and politicians, my dad could not comprehend my deep reservations about Barack Obama's leadership. Indeed, he viewed any criticism of Obama as bringing aid and comfort to white supremacists. My father hardly was alone among Black Americans across all generations. The near complete unanimity of passionate Black American admiration for Obama carried with it an absolute resistance to hearing any complaints about the Black president. And indeed, there was much to admire: an exceptional resume, an attractive family with a Black wife who is his professional and intellectual equal, handsome and graying toward distinguished maturity, a strategically wise, moderate, progressive political position, and a place as the sometimes self-professed messianic fulfillment of the civil rights movement of the 1960s. For many Black Americans, the ascent of Barack Obama to the presidency was equivalent to the moment of Jubilee. An extraordinary disciplined individual, Barack Obama preempted the smallest hint of scandal by admitting that he had smoked pot during his youth. He even crafted a narrative of a rise from adversity, growing up successfully by the efforts of a single parent despite a missing father, albeit a white single mother with a PhD whose own parents were affluent residents of Hawaii. With every drop of respectability in place, his somewhat icy intellect, coupled with his enthusiasm for basketball and for Black music across a half century of styles, he was an inordinately appealing candidate with an ideal combination of the cool and the rational. For many white Americans, his elections confirmed their belief that American racism is a thing of the past. But an underemphasized dimension of each of Obama's campaigns, a dimension patently relevant to the most recent presidential election, is the reality that he only received a minority of votes among whites who cast ballots. In fact, he would have been swept away in a landslide had only whites been the voters. In 2008, 55% of white voters cast their ballots for John McCain. In 2012, 59% of white voters cast their ballots for Mitt Romney. No, did you want to take on the second one, Kim? Or you just want to keep me reading? All right, guess I'll continue with the.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Okay. So you want to.
Here we go. Right. Nevertheless, some of those white voters did not vote for him, took his 8 years as president as license to assert that the country is post-racial, even while attacking him with both veiled and overt racial slurs. But racism is organic to American life, and it sits at the core of persistence of racial economic inequality. In his fascinating profile of Obama, Ta-Nehisi Coates refers to the mark of a system engineered to place one on top of the other, to place white over black. He offers some examples. The facts that blacks with a college degree have an unemployment rate almost as high as white high school graduates, that completion of a college education leads blacks to carry twice the level of student loan debt than whites 4 years after their degree. The blacks experience a significantly higher default rate on their loans, that black households have 1/7 of the wealth of white households, and that black families with 100,000 or more in income reside in more disadvantaged neighborhoods than white families making less than $30,000. Sadly, these actually are softer illustrations of the mark of the system than findings that have emerged from research I have done with Derek Hamilton, Ann Price, and other members of the National Asset Scoreboard for Communities of Color, NASCC research team. We find a much higher discrepancy between black and white wealth than the gap that Coates reports. Blacks with some college education actually have higher unemployment rates than whites who never finished high school. At each level of education, the black rate of unemployment is twice as high as the white rate. Moreover, the relative economic position on virtually all indicators, including the racial unemployment rate gap, has not improved since the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Estimates generated from the 2013 round of the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances indicate that black households have 1/13 of the wealth of white households at the median. We have concluded that the average black household would have to save 100% of its income for 3 consecutive years to close the wealth gap. The key source of the black-white wealth gap is the intergenerational effects of transfers of resources. White parents have far greater resources to give their children via gifts and inheritances. So that typical white young adult starts their working lives with a much greater initial net wealth than the typical black young adult. These intergenerational effects are blatantly meritocratic.
Wow. You know what really stands out to me is that blacks would have to save 100% of our income to close for 3 consecutive years to close the wealth gap. I don't know about y'all, but I know I can't do that. Can you do that?
A lot of us are, hand to mouth, month to month. So, that's not going to work.
Yeah, that is nuts. I'm just gonna type in some notes in the chat real quick. That's what we need to
All right.
To close the wealth gap. Yeah, it's crazy, fam. You know what? I gotta do this. I'm gonna put some music on it. Not saying that our voices are talented. Voiceover voices aren't cool, but I'm gonna put on a little music, fam, because this is how we do it. We're
gonna get a little crunk up in here.
Yeah, we're gonna get a little crunk up in here. All right, so let's do this. Did you go to the next slide?
Yeah, I advanced.
Okay, because I was tripping. I was like, oh gosh. Yeah, I'm trying to. Man, where'd that beat go? Anyway, I'm just gonna play this beat because I don't even know what happened to that one.
Any old beat will do.
Just gonna get any old beat. Okay, here we go. All right, we're looking through. Okay, so you took the other slide, right?
Yeah, so you're ready to go.
Let's do it. All right, so indeed, the history of black wealth deprivation, from the failure to provide ex-slaves with 40 acres and a mule, to the violent destruction of black property and white riots, to the seizure and exploration of black-owned land, to the impact of racially restrictive covenants on home ownership, to the discriminatory application of policies like the GI Bill and the FHA, created the foundation for a perpetual racial wealth gap. Blacks working full-time have lower levels of wealth than whites who are employed. Blacks in the third quintile of the income distribution have less wealth or a lower net worth than whites in the lowest quintile. Even more damning for any presumption that America is free of racism is our finding that black households whose heads have college degrees have $10,000 less in net worth than white households whose heads never finished high school. As we point out in our report, umbrellas don't make it rain. Studying hard and working hard does not enable blacks to eliminate the racial wealth gap. I want to repeat that once again, family. Studying hard and working hard does not enable blacks to eliminate the racial wealth gap. Doing the right thing is far from enough. I had a queasy feeling about Barack Obama's candidacy from the moment I heard his 2004 Democratic National Convention speech that lifted him into national prominence. A speech that Coates summarizes in the profile. Toward the end of the speech, Obama observed that black families in urban centers realize that government alone can't teach our kids to learn, that children can't achieve unless we raise their expectations and turn off the television sets and eradicate the slander that says a black youth with a book is acting white. The acting white libel, a myth that will not die, argues that low school performance for black students is a product of a culturally based black opposition to high academic achievement. I long have been baffled by the tenacious hold this argument has on the American imagination. After all, black families have fought for education for their children against insurmountable odds from slavery times. White students who label their high achievers, quote, geeks, end quote, and nerds, have no less a degree of anti-intellectualism. In fact, they may have a higher degree of anti-intellectualism, since black students from families with a given level of parental income or education get more years of schooling and more credentials than white students from families with comparable socioeconomic status. In our research for the NASCC project, we discovered that black parents who provide some financial support for their children's higher education have 1/3 of the wealth of white parents who provide no financial support for their children's higher education. Black culture, if anything, has been furiously supportive of education. All right, next one.
The acting white libel is symptomatic of, is that supposed to say label? But libel is symptomatic of a more general perspective, perspective that argues that an important factor explaining racial economic disparities is self-defeating or dysfunctional behavior on the part of blacks themselves. And Barack Obama continually has trafficked in this perspective. Of course, there are some black folk who engage in habits that undermine their potential accomplishments, but there are some white folk who engage in habits that undermine their potential accomplishments as well. And there is no evidence to demonstrate that are proportionately more black who behave in ways that undercut achievement, especially since it is clearer that blacks do more with less. Nevertheless, Obama consistently has trafficked heavily in the tropes of black dysfunction. Either he is unfamiliar with or uninterested in the evidence that undercuts the black behavioral deficiency narrative. These tropes, in my view, do malicious work. I worried that it was possible for the symbolic and inspirational aspects of having a Black president would be more than offset by the damages that could be done by the messages delivered by a Black president. And it has been damaging to have Barack Obama, a Black man, speaking from the authoritative platform of the presidency, reinforce the widely held belief that racial inequality in the United States is in large measure the direct responsibility of Black folk. This has been the deal breaker for me, not merely a silence on white physical and emotional violence directed against Black Americans, but the denial of the centrality of American racism in explaining sustained Black-white disparity. Apart from the Black dysfunction, Obama does acknowledge that ongoing discrimination is a partial factor explaining racial inequality and says that anti-discrimination enforcement is the type of Black-specific measure that he can endorse. Of course, anti-discrimination laws do not operate exclusively on behalf of Black folk. They really are universal measures intended to contain all forms of discrimination, and while effective enforcement can improve Black employment opportunities, it will do little to address massive inherited racial wealth differences. Obama's general position is racial equality can be achieved or at least approached via politics that uplift all Americans experiencing poverty and deprivation. Obama has said that, as a general matter, my view would be that if you want to get an African American poverty income gap, wealth gap, achievement gap, that the most important thing is to make sure that the society as a whole does right by the people who are poor. Huh? Our working class are aspiring to have a better life for their kids, higher minimum wages, full employment programs, early childhood education. Those kinds of programs are by design universal, but by definition, because they are helping folks who are in the worst economic situations, are most likely to disproportionately impact and benefit Black Americans.
There you go. But these particular programs, all even in their diluted forms likely to be under assault under the new regime, are incremental and display no boldness of spirit. Obama's evocation of the notion that better is good and his own acknowledgement that maybe I'm just not being sufficiently optimistic or imaginative is testament to his inveterate cautiousness. The timid nature of these policies changes dooms their disproportionate benefit for Blacks to be marginal at best. A higher minimum wage does not ensure individuals, Black or white, actually will have jobs, nor does it ensure adequate hours of work to generate non-poverty incomes. Full employment policies under the Obama administration have meant old-fashioned Keynesian stimulus policies that rely heavily upon the unpredictable response of the private sector to the prompt of government expenditures. Quality early childhood education for all is wonderful, but the racial achievement gap widens most dramatically during comparatively later years of schooling. Furthermore, none of these policies promise any significant effect on the most pernicious economic disparity, the racial wealth gap. Admittedly, there is one major initiative that the Obama administration has inaugurated that is Black specific, but it is the exception that proves the rule. It exposes all the issues at play. My Brother's Keeper is a program premised on the view that young Black men constitute a social problem and need interventions that will alter their outlook and actions. The focus is on reforming young men rather than directly increasing the resources possessed by them and their families and removing the constraints they face. Again, the underlying ideological motivation is a belief in Black cultural deficiency. And again, this type of initiative is another expression of failure to pursue bold policies that confront the fundamental causes of racial disparity in American society. The Obama administration never gave serious consideration to aggressive, transformative, universal policies like a public sector employment guarantee for all Americans, a federally financed trust fund for all newborn infants with amounts dedicated by a child's parent, wealth position, or the provision of gifted equality education for all children. These are universal programs that can have a significant disproportionate impact and benefit for African Americans in the process of helping all Americans, unlike the types of universal programs endorsed by the president.
Okay. And the emphasis on exclusively universal programs yields the spectacle of a Black president who opposes the most dramatic Black specific program of all, reparations for African Americans. This opposition ultimately seems to amount to a matter of political expediency. In his conversation with Coates, the president appears to acknowledge that there is a sound moral and philosophical case for reparations, particularly if, as Coates presses him to concede, incremental changes in existing social programs will not close the gap, especially the racial wealth gap. The president ultimately takes the position that it is politically untenable to enact a reparations program. If so, and if nothing comparable can be realized, then I contend that it is possible to close the wealth gap.
Just to clarify, Kim, it says impossible. I think you read possible, so just to clarify.
Takes position. Okay, let me
so
see.
It said then I contend that it is. I thought you said
Oh,
possible.
then I contend that it is impossible. Okay, yeah, okay,
Yeah,
I
just to
said
clarify.
possible. So then I contend that it is impossible. Okay, thank you for that. Impossible, because I was going to read that again anyways because it wasn't making no sense. Then I contend that it is impossible to close the racial wealth gap. Okay. But why does the president believe it is impossible? He says it is hard to think of any society in human history in which a majority of population has said that as a consequence of historic wrongs, we are now going to take a big chunk of the nation's resources over a long period of time to make that right. The United States has taken a small chunk of the nation's resources over a short period of time to try to make right on the World War II incarcerations of Japanese Americans. Malaysia's new economic policy has taken a large chunk of the nation's resources over a long period of time to correct the inferior position of the native Malays. However, the native Malays are a numerical majority in their country who also are recipients of the wealth redistribution program conducted there. There is no doubt that the political obstacles to congressional approval of Black reparations are significant. But in 1820, in the United States, one might not have been able to conceive that American slavery would ever come to an end, yet there were some who advocated abolition. In 1950, in South Africa, one might not have been able to imagine that apartheid would ever come to an end, but there were activists who already had begun to oppose the system. If Black reparations is the right thing to do, and I know in the depth of my soul that it is, then we should work to make it happen, no matter how long the odds. We should not bow to the altar of presumed political expediency. After all, it may be the cause that the president simply is wrong about the impossibility of making reparations happen. His defense to achieving the better over the determination to achieve the best may be a mistake. There are times when the effort to get to the better the marginal change that appears to be an improvement is so exhausting that its accomplishment becomes a barrier to getting the best. Mark Gomans of the Haas Institute at Berkeley has said time and again in municipal struggles for minimum wage increases that the fight for 15 is easier than a fight for 10. So go big or go home.
I guess. And sometimes Obama's careful assessments of the political landscape are wrong. For example, he has said repeatedly that you do not win elections by telling the American people that things are going wrong. But that is precisely what Donald Trump did in winning the most recent presidential campaign. Black reparations become a legitimate policy claim if and when a majority of Americans are convinced that it is an idea with merit. As Obama's 2 elections demonstrate, it does not necessarily require a majority of white Americans to support such a program. The political challenge is to forge that national majority, presumably with approximately 40% of white Americans on board. Having a black president oppose reparations does not help the cause, particularly when that black president makes the case that an important source of black disadvantage is black folks' own behavior. But Black America should have paid attention to the experience of post-colonial Black Africa and the Caribbean. Leaders who look like you do not necessarily act in ways that benefit you. So be it. The struggle for reparations and for Black lives and justice must and will continue, with or without Barack Obama in fold. Boom.
Yeah, well, it looks like it's going to be without. So,
all right, so
we press forward.
Yeah. All right, so let's before we wrap it up here, wanted to read to the family for those who aren't aware of. Looks like Citigroup did a study on the effects of racism here in America, and supposedly it's causing the U.S. economy a loss of $16 trillion. That's 16 with the T. 16 trillion. All right. Nationwide protests have cast a spotlight on racism and inequality in the. Oh, let me go back. This looks like it was written September 23rd, 2020, just to clarify. Nationwide protests have cast a spotlight on racism and inequality in the United States. Now, a major bank has put a price tag on how much the economy has lost as a result of discrimination against African Americans. 16 trillion. Since 2000, U.S. gross domestic product lost that much as a result of discriminatory practices in a range of areas, including in education and access to business loans, according to a newly study by Citigroup. It's not an insignificant number. By comparison, U.S. GDP totaled $19.5 trillion last year, and not acting to reverse discrimination practices will continue to exact a cost. Citigroup estimates the economy would see a $5 trillion boost over the next 5 years if the U.S. were to tackle key areas of discrimination against African Americans. Quote, "We believe we have a responsibility to address current events and to frame them with an economic lens in order to highlight the real cost of long-standing discrimination against minority groups, especially against Black people, and particularly in the U.S., wrote Raymond J. McGuire, a vice chairman at the bank and chairman of its banking, capital markets, and advisory team. You want to take the rest?
Let's see, where are we at the end of the first paragraph there?
So yeah, if you want to start at the top.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Wall Street itself has also faced accusations for years of discriminatory practices against African Americans, such as limiting approval for mortgages or not providing enough banking options in minority neighborhoods, which are among the damaging actions identified by Citigroup researchers. Specifically, the study came up with $16 trillion in lost GDP by noting the 4 key racial groups between African Americans and white. Oh, 4 key racial gaps, not groups. Sorry there. 13 trillion lost in potential business revenue because of discriminatory lending to African American entrepreneurs, with an estimated 6.1 million jobs not generated as a result. 2.7 trillion in income loss because of disparities in wages suffered by African Americans. 218 billion lost over the past 2 decades because of discrimination in providing housing credit, and 90 billion to 113 billion in lifetime income loss from discrimination in accessing higher education. As a result, Citigroup urges a slew of actions to reverse discriminatory practices and boost GDP over the next 5 years, including addressing the wage gap suffered by African Americans and promoting diversity at the top within banks and companies. Citigroup's recommendations aren't new. Various studies have shown similar findings, and experts have called for similar action for years, though so far progress has been slow.
Absolutely. Progress has definitely been slow. And for those who are seeing the replay, if you aren't with us live, go ahead and share your thoughts, please, in the comments to let us know what you think about what we just read, in particular with Obama.
Yeah, I mean, Obama, reading that was just really like reliving through what we lived through, everything that was said. It's really on point. I mean, even to the point where his parents just loved Obama, couldn't do no wrong, couldn't speak nothing against him. My mom was exactly the same way during the first term. The second term, she had kind of came around because, she could just be, well, for one, because like Biden kept saying hope, 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 hope. She had so much hope for the first Black president, and she was just not seeing any change. So, by the end of his second term, she was just like over it. And so was I.
Mm-hmm. And probably a lot of other people too.
Yeah,
I know
and his disparaging comments towards the Black community. I always picked up on that, talking about Big Mama and Pookie and all this other stuff.
Wow.
Like he was pandering to the Black community. And it worked for some. In one, I don't know, press conference or something like that, he made a comment from the mic. He was like, oh, and if you want to pop off, and then my daughter, she just ate that up. So like the younger generation, she was just like, oh, he said, my president just said pop off. But to me, it just felt like pandering at that point.
Yeah, it's like when what's her name, Hillary Clinton, did the Dougie or whatever dancing that she was doing to quote unquote appeal to Black people instead of policy making, right? I mean,
right.
That's what we're looking for. I think some people think that, particularly politicians and some media, think that Black people are just a bunch of like dancing buffoons, and we don't take politics seriously. And in some cases, some of our society in the Black community actually don't take politics seriously.
Right. And like I said, some of the younger generations, they really, really eat that type of symbolism up.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably make that argument for, the previous generation as well. There's some that just take that symbolism. But I probably would, at the same time, argue that the civil rights era, the 60s, especially in the 60s and early 70s, at any rate, at least from my perspective, at least they had kind of an awareness of voting and actually just trying to take the vote seriously. Where, some people may argue today that where, voting really doesn't help the Black community, we should not even think about voting. I vehemently disagree with that. I think you should try to weaponize your vote as much as you possibly can. Don't ever sit out of the voting process. I had a conversation with my grandfather before he passed away, and he told me that he had to deal with his discriminatory just practices for him just to get even registered to vote, and he was a dentist and a vet, and they were still discriminatory against him. And he was also telling me about people getting lynched, just to get, the right to vote. So that's just my 2 cents. So I definitely say at least weaponize your vote as possible. So yeah.
Yeah, the right to vote was definitely a hard fought struggle, but at the same time, you don't want to waste your vote either. I mean, I still think that had the 2020 down ballot strategy worked, it would have really sent an impactful message to the Democrats that we're not gonna put up with this. But that didn't happen, and we did put Biden in office. I think a lot more people are waking up now. Some people just really have to see it to believe it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So hopefully now that they can see for themselves, they'll, like you said, weaponize their vote and vote for candidates that serve their interests.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, that segueing into the AB 2296, kind of the same thing, and shout out to Governor Newsom for listening to the people, to listening to the community, and to keep this reparations movement forward, because a lot of people, let me not say a lot of people, but there are some people that still believe or still don't know that there's actually a task force to study reparations. And it's hard. I could see where there can be some cynicism, especially for our community, for those who descend from U.S. chattel slavery, who've been here for all this time. I could see where the idea and the negative connotation can be for us actually not getting repair and not receiving reparations, not only here in California, but on a federal level in all other states here in the United States should have some form of reparations for their Black citizens. So I can see where people might feel a certain way about it, but at the same time, we know that this is a debt, it's owed, and obviously from the articles that we did read, that the evidence is there.
Yeah, I mean, facts. I mean, it is easy to, just feel that, nothing's going to happen, be a naysayer like Obama, it's impossible, blah, blah, blah. But, at the same time, we gotta keep fighting, because like you said, this is a debt and it is owed. Nobody's even not saying that it's not owed. It's just, they just feel that they're not going to do it because that's the benign neglect that has been doled out to the Black community, our entire existence here in America.
Yeah. So once again, check us out. California Reparations Task Force report. We're going to be doing a marathon read. If you can join us, please join us 8:30 p.m. PST, Monday through Friday. If you're not able to join, then check out the replay. Hopefully we will all be learning something as we go through and read the report. Outside of that, as far as I'm concerned, everybody have a great day, and love, peace, and reparations, and keep doing what you're doing, family.
Yeah, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and the reparations fight continues. Peace.